this meeting. I'll ask Alec to do the opening karakia, please.
Tuia ki ronga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki wahu, tuia te here tangata, ko ronga te pau, ka ronga te ao, umi e, hui e, tae ki e.
Thank you. Just one item of housekeeping. The meeting is being live streamed, and with any apologies. No apologies. Move on to the confirmation of order of business as in the agenda. Interest updates to the interest register. Identify any conflicts of interest in the agenda. Anyone have anything? I just identify that when I speak to my chair's report, I am a member of the Tapawera Men's Shed, which I'm going to talk about in part. So with that, we then move on to public forum. Sue, if you'd like to come up to the table there, to the microphone, it's 5 minutes. I think you've been made aware of that. And Sue's going to speak about management of waste, including waste sludge giving off greenhouse gases. So a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And
kia ora. Good morning.
The microphone is on for you.
Oh, sorry, I haven't got it on. Oh, you put it on, didn't you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. There's a lot to remember.
So there'll be a bell at 3 and then a concluding one at 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. So today I'm talking about pyrolysis, waste to energy, and I'm hoping that everybody here will be interested or curious even about what I'm saying, enough to, if not ask questions straight away, but to give me some feedback. Before Christmas, on the 7th of December, I gave a presentation at TDC, and you can refer to that because it's up on their Google website or Google page. But just to recap briefly, in my last presentation, I wonder, could that be made a tiny bit larger, please? I'm not quite seeing it.
I don't know that it can be.
No? Okay.
It's full screen.
All right, thank you. Yeah, my last presentation, I looked at a number of items. One was to do with increasing reference to climate change in national and local documents and the need to do something about it. Also, public-private partnerships, and I looked up some information on the Asia Infrastructure Bank, loans to support public-private partnerships regarding, in particular, climate change and the effects of global warming around the world. So there is a source of funding that's recognised that around the world we need to spend $5 trillion on preparing ourselves for the worst of climate change and trying to mitigate it as we go along. The NZ Waste to Energy Guide encourages investment in low emissions technology. So you've got a platform to build on. This image here shows you that the progress that has been made since the 4 years ago when I along with Linda Hanna, Katerina Seligman and Don Graves of the Carbon Action Group, when we made the presentation at Wakatu House, to which council officers were invited and attended, both TDC and NCC. And we had scientists from Lincoln and Massey University, and we had orchardists and people from the forestry industry as well, to consider pyrolysing their waste, whether it's wood slash or orchard waste, to turn it into biochar, which provides rather a value stream. That's the conventional pyrolysis approaches. As we go towards the top of the image, we've got the advanced pyrolysis approaches, catalytic, or hydro, autothermal, and various others. And then we get on to I can't remember, pyrolysis, yes, pyrolysis, that's what I want to talk about, pyrolysis integrated with other systems. And what happens is that as the technology has progressed, oh, really, 5 minutes?
3.
Oh, 3, all right. Sorry. As technology has progressed, so the value streams of using more advanced pyrolysis approaches allows more value streams. You have oil. So, for example, one of the images, I'll get to that in a little while, actually. You have oil, you have other forms of energy, and you have chemicals that can be siphoned and contained. And all of this I'm talking about that produces no emissions. It's emission-free. So whatever you've read in the newspapers or online about what's happening at Tarafati, for example, all of that technology that's being promoted is emissions-free. So co-pyrolysis is the thing I want to talk about, and it involves 2 or more feedstocks, for example, wood and sewage, plus the addition of anaerobic digestion at either end of the process can produce high-value hydrogen. Now, we've heard a lot about the value of hydrogen, and in a lot of ways it's a waste of time. But if it is a product of a process that actually produces more pluses, then what's not to like about it? It's got a purpose. Biomass-derived hydrogen production is a clean and green technology with high-value environmental and economic advantages. I discovered 3 levels of investment. So the first one is a simple retort that would cost about $3,000 to $4,000, and as you can see, it can can be pulled by a ute. Now that could travel around the orchards where currently they are allowed to cover orchard waste with diesel and create all the fumes they want and send it down the Motueka Valley. Is that it?
Yeah, just if you've got some concluding remarks.
Yes, can I just show you the other 2 images, please?
Oh, I'm not sure about 2 images. We can circulate the images and commentary.
Can I please just show you the last one then?
Yep, for sure.
Okay. So that one is 3 to 4 million. And this bioplant, which is part of Global Green International Solutions, is about 34 million. And that is the all-star one that produces all the value streams and does away with all our waste problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, do you have a quick question?
I do, and it's of you, Chair. Can you please ensure that that presentation is circulated to all of us, please?
We will do that. Thank you. Thank you, Sue, for coming in. And appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Am I allowed to stay?
Yes, okay. For the open meeting anyway.
Thank you.
Yes. So next we'll move on to confirmation of minutes of the 1st of December 2023. The recommendation is that the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit confirms the minutes of the meeting of the Nelson Tasman Regional Business Landfill Unit held on the 1st of December 2023 is a true and correct record. Would someone like to move that?
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Move Councillor Courtney. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Walker. Any discussion? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against, the resolution is carried. Thank you. Now, if we put up the images, we just Tapwa's main shed applied for a grant from TDC's Waste Minimisation Fund and were allocated. The first one shows some of the 80 kilos of batteries they've already collected. And when I was in Wakefield yesterday, I looked in the unit there, which, if you bring up the next slide, one of not all the buckets were close to full again, so they're not included in that there. So there's the battery recycling station. So we've got one at Tapua and one at Wakefield. So we've taken around 80, if not close to 100, looking at what was in the bins yesterday out of the waste stream. So they certainly are working. At Tapawera initially we had some problem with people putting rubbish in them, but we've made the holes much smaller, other than for the larger batteries are problematic. Surprising, even on the day we put it up, there was people coming and asking about it and wanting to put batteries in it. So been a really good initiative, and I think, Aaron, you've got a question about that later on. It'd be good to hear from Nathan just how we're going with our own ones. But the boys, or men, I call them boys, are really keen to do some more. So I think they're going to put in an application for a couple more and take to other communities. But yeah, now they've got the blueprint, they can whip them up reasonably quickly. So that's all really I have to say in the Chair's verbal report. I just thought that would be of interest to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. The landfill has been running reasonably smoothly. Waste volumes are down on budget, so our revenue is quite constrained. So the report shows, reasonable finances at the present time, but the last 2 months since the report was written have been down further. So there'll be some pressure on the operational cost budgets this year. In terms of our battery bin program, it is stalled at the moment. We're trying to test them. We've been in contact with FENS about testing them. So basically what we've done is built 3 of them. We want to test them under adverse conditions. I set them alight with batteries in them and see how it goes. FENS don't want to do that yet because they're worried that the way that batteries combust may increase the pressure inside the bins and therefore essentially pop them. So we've got some work to do with FENS to go through that. We're waiting for them to come back to us before we can actually test them. So I've asked Graham Poxon from Tasman District Council to help us just with the logistics of that. And we're waiting for the feedback from FENS. So that's where we're still stopped at the moment. Our intent was to essentially test them under adverse conditions before we ever consider using them and make sure that they aren't a danger to anybody if a major fire comes out of them. And so I really need to wait until such time as that's being done before we can progress further. But we do have 3 of them constructed. There may need to be some minor modifications, some additional pressure relief holes or something put in them to reduce the risk if that's what FENS believe. But wait and hear from there. In terms of other things, the landfill's been going well in terms of gas collection. We confirmed in December that we received that we're still on track, and we received a unique emission factor of 0.091, which is the maximum emission factor reduction we can get. So we're as far down as we can be. This year, or for the 2023 calendar year, which is the one that we've just done, the default emission factor, which is the amount of emission per ton of waste that a general landfill would have to be judged against, was 0.91 tons of methane per ton of waste, and that it's increasing to 1.023 next year. So if we still get 90% reduction against the default next year, our unique emission factor would actually increase to 0.1023. So we're not expecting to get the same number at the end of this current calendar year, but the change is very marginal. So we're definitely in a good space there. Health and safety, there are a bunch of minor incidences, and over the last quarter, I've received some questions offline from Councillor Stallard, and I'll just answer those. He was asking questions specifically in regard to the gas incidences. We had one incidence where a subcontractor started work on site prior to having their gas permits signed off. So there's a process that we've put in place that requires a gas permit for every activity involving gas on the site for every day. So you can't run a permit from one day to the next. It has to be renewed the next day. Wind conditions and other things will change, and therefore we need to make sure that they are taken into account. And in this particular case, the contractor started before they had that permit in place. We stopped works, required them to get the permit, etc., and have tried to put in place an improvement program. Another one we had was where when we were changing the traffic management setup on the site at the upper surface of the landfill, the contractor shifted the traffic manager's accommodation, the hut, and put it beside a gas well, but that gas well hadn't actually been capped properly, and so it was put beside a gas well which had some fugitive emissions around it. So that was identified and resolved. We had to go and remove it and cap the well. And a third incident was, which really wasn't, I don't think it was really an incident, I actually think it was the system working. We had the contract was searching for, by digging trenches for some of the leachate wells or leachate lines in the front face of the landfill. When they were digging down, they struck the pipe. They had a gas permit in place. The gas permit didn't allow for anybody to enter any of the excavations. So as soon as that pipe was struck and it essentially came loose, and it let more gas out into the excavation. So everybody essentially regrouped, and we redid the gas permit and put completely different controls in so that we could then fix that issue that occurred. So I don't really think it was an incident. It was actually the system working properly as it's meant to do. So I'm quite happy about the fact that we will report that, but it's not a problem per se. It's the system doing what it's meant to do. So overall, there was another incident which was not ideal. We've got quite a lot of signage at the landfill about not smoking and all those sorts of things. We turned out that there was a guy vaping beside a gas well, which isn't ideal. So, there was quite a full on. There's quite a lot of work going on at the landfill. There's all of the materials going for the construction of the front buttress and the stability and leachate works, which has made the site busy. Also had the tender for the new operations and maintenance contract that's been running, and obviously there's the other projects in the background, such as the utility stage 2 consent. There was a question about the utility stage 2 consent. The consent process that we're going through is actually a closure consent. So basically looking at closing the stage 2 of the Eves Valley landfill. And in part of that is, as part of the consent, getting approval to continue to use that in an emergency for emergency provisions into the future. So that process has been ongoing for some years, and we're now essentially at the point where we're just waiting for the documents to be prepared by the Tasman District Council regulatory arm and given to us. So we're right near the end. They are under quite a lot of pressure from their workload, so I can't give any indication of when we will receive those. We are still awaiting the completion of the deed of agreement in terms of reference review. So Nelson City Council has put them in front of the council, and they've been adopted by Nelson City, but they haven't been adopted by Tasman District Council. The situation at the present time is that our legal advisors have gone back through after some discussion with TDC's legal team and have updated it to reflect what, to include those aspects that the TDC legal team wanted, and it's now sitting with the TDC legal team awaiting, presentation to the council. Well, that's my understanding of the situation. One project that's stalled is the Class 3 hail facility at Eves Valley, and there's a briefing after this report and today about the situation with contaminated soils within the region. Another question from Councillor Stallard was We cleaned out the stormwater retention pond 3 and that material was disposed. Basically what we do is we remove the sediment material from the bottom of the pond. We take it up to it's quite a slurry when we remove it. We dry up the pond, we empty it during a dry period. We transport it on a truck up to the top. We then place it and work it so that it dries out, and then we can use that as daily cover for the landfill. So it doesn't get disposed out, it gets used for a beneficial purpose. What else is there? In terms of gas, gas collection itself on the landfill has dropped a little bit recently. That's simply because we've had to take quite a lot of wells that are recent wells offline because that's the area where we're filling with waste at the present time. But it's not down significantly or sufficiently to cause us a concern. So, it's moved down from about 800 cubic meters an hour down to about 680 or 650 cubic meters an hour. So it's still a significant gas volume being captured and destroyed. In terms of the ETS position, we are in a very good place. There's no real change to that. But as I said before, the waste volumes are down at the present time year to date, and month on month at the present time we are below budget. So our revenue is below budget. So if there's any other questions, feel free to. Oh, well, actually one important one. I'd like to introduce Will Nienhouse as our new operations manager for the landfill business unit. He's joined us in December, was it? Yeah, and so coming up to speed quickly. So yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Well, welcome. Good luck. And hope we see you at these meetings regularly.
Thank you, Chair Stewart. I'd like to
not sure I want to be the
not yet. No, you're in waiting. I'd like to thank you, Nathan, for your report. I always find them incredibly interesting. I'm looking at 3.1 for starts, and I want to commend you on the effort you're putting in the health and safety aspects of the operation. It's incredibly important. And 3.1, you mentioned in there that you meet the various contractors that are on site on a weekly basis for safety and to work with safety and vehicle management and hazards. Is that a new innovation, or has that been in place for some time? And what are the benefits coming out of that? Turn your mic on. Apologies.
As I say, meeting the contractors regularly has always been something we do on the site. The weekly one and being much more formal and doing it at the start of every week is largely being brought about by the number of contractors on the site. What those meetings are intended is that every contractor is required to essentially outline their work program for the week, where they will have vehicles moving, what hazards they're exposing, and how they were going to interact with the other contractors on site. It's our responsibility as a person conducting a business or undertaking, PCBU, to make sure that those people are acting in a safe way. And so this is one of the many things that we try to implement to do that. In addition to these meetings, we obviously have permitting systems. We have management plans for vehicle movements. We have, there's a bunch of other pieces that go with it. But a key aspect of safety is communication. And that's what we're really trying to focus on in this.
I have a follow-up, one or two, and then I'll give it to...
Yeah, that will be fine, Councillor Corley.
Just can I go to the battery one? And I want to know what sort of urgency you place on the, battery collection aspect of the operation. And, how soon we'll be able to move on that, do you think? I know you give a little bit of a look there, but you've passed it back to TDC and they appear to be happy to.
So through the chair.
So just what sort of priority has it got?
Yeah, through the chair, fire at the landfill is one of our highest priorities. If we have a fire at the landfill, it could take our facility out of service for some time, for quite some time if it got established in the landfill. So fire management is a key aspect. And our principal ignition sources at the landfill are batteries or flares. boat flares.
What?
For our principal ignition systems, batteries, lithium-ion batteries or boat flares.
Yeah.
Right. So for us to manage the ignition events, which, when a fire starts, we have to try to reduce the number of batteries getting into the landfill. So I hold it as a high priority. That being said, we have, over the last 3 years, we've been paying, and supporting NCC and TDC to do battery diversion. So there's the Don't Bin Batteries campaign that's been going, and that's actually quite successful already. So we have reduced the number of ignition events significantly. I think there's only been 3 in the last quarter that have occurred, which is significantly down from a few years ago. We'd maybe have 20 in some quarters. So it is definitely working. The reason I am pushing for, continuing at the battery bins is that I worry that collecting batteries, and principally collecting batteries inside a building, puts a lot of other things at risk. And I would like to have the battery bins located outside rather than inside. The chair has obviously been part of the men's shed, and they're doing a great job, absolutely doing a great job. For me to offer a service, it needs to be demonstrated to be safe and to not have significant other adverse effects that would come from it. And as a person, I struggle to see a wooden or a plastic facility accepting a fire, something that could go on fire. And so that's why I'm looking at this more engineered stainless steel, thing with double lining, so that I am totally confident that if it's sitting in a car park and someone vandalizes it, as an example, pour petrol on it and set it on fire, it's not going to create any other adverse effects to the cars surrounding it, buildings surrounding it, etc. So I will continue to keep running there. I'm not an expert in fires, or in fire management, which is why I'm trying to get advice from FENS and from others to make sure that is safe. One of the things we would also like to do with these battery bins is to ensure that if they did go on fire, it doesn't completely ruin them. Right. So the idea is that if you've got sign writing and all that stuff on it, could cost you $1,000 or $2,000 to completely repair the sign writing. So if we can, we would like it so that actually goes on, goes on fire, and we can essentially put it out, clean it out, put the new piece inside, and then it's back ready to go again. So that was another piece of it, and all that may require is a different set of insulation on the outside of the bin, but so that it protects it from getting too hot. So there's a few things that we're still trying to do here. The first one was to try to make sure that it is safe if it were to go on fire.
Thank you.
I'll just take a break for a moment.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just wanted to have a quick conversation around landfill waste volumes. And, on one side, it's probably quite good that our airspace has a bit of a breather from the landfill waste going to it. On the other side, though, that places a bit of risk around us on how we've done our bottom line for our figures and budgeting. So I want to know, what risk factor do we sit if the market continues to go down with regards to the commercial use and the development within our local area? And I guess the other thing is, it's great for us to be able to put in a report that it's down. I just wonder if we've had any reports of fly tipping going up due to the cost of our dumping. So there's probably 2 parts to my equation. Thanks.
Yeah, through the chair, clearly waste is down. It is putting pressure on the operating expenses or operating account, simply because our revenue is down. Am I very worried about it? We had budgeted for a net deficit of $91,000 for this year. So the reason we hadn't budgeted for a net deficit of $91,000 this year is because we had an accumulated surplus of, I believe, $910,000. And so what the landfill business unit does is say, if we have a surplus, we've often accumulated that surplus inside our accounts, and then we budget to remove or to essentially spend that surplus, or to discount the rate for the waste coming in to the end of the landfill life. And if we have a deficit, we would then increase the rate of the landfill fee by a small amount to recover that money. And so we basically, if we're over, we reduce the rate slightly. If we're under, we increase the rate slightly. And in this case, we are basically budgeting for a deficit for this year. So currently, we're running in surplus. So, and the reason we're in surplus is because our assumptions around ETS levy were that we weren't necessarily going to hit the full 90% reduction. So we had assumed a slightly higher ETS levy, but we did hit 90% reduction, which gives us that extra money that we're not going to give to the government in ETS, which sits in our books. And essentially that money is, put us in a slightly better position financially than we would otherwise be. And we are now eating into that money that the ETS has given us. So it's possible that we will end the year below 91,000 in deficit, because if the waste remains going low, last month, it's not in this report, but last month we lost about $170,000, I believe, in terms of the against budget. Am I worried? No, not really, because the business unit has 910,000 thereabouts. Andrew can probably answer the specific numbers in surplus. So what we'll do is eat into that surplus slightly more, which would mean in future we would have to run a lesser deficit in future years. So it's not ideal. I mean, ideally we want to come in smack on budget, but that is a relatively idealistic position.
And you don't have as well today?
I'd have to ask the councillors, the council staff members to answer that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is actually a performance measure in our next LTP. So it was a concern that we have had, and we're gathering data at the moment. So as soon as we've got the graphs together and the data, we'll report back to council.
Thank you. Andrew, I wondered if you could just cover off a little more around the emissions, the units, and the plan going forward with them, please.
Right, 2 questions. So the emissions reporting period is for the calendar year. So we had budgeted for about an 80% reduction in the unique emissions factor. And so when it came in at the minimum one, we had over provided for the emissions cost for the calendar year. 6 months of that, of course, was in the last financial year, and 6 months is in this financial year. So you'll see in the financial report, the line for emissions for the current month is negative, and the year to date is a small figure of about 3,000 negative expense. And that's the effect of that. Now, for the rest of for the next 6 months, we have provided for the emissions factor at the 80%, but it will now be 90% of the increased standard emissions factor. So the savings we will still have savings going forward for the next 6 months compared with budget. With regards to the units, we had bought units to fix the price. That was based on the policy at the time, and of course our emissions reductions have been so significant that we now find ourselves with having surplus units. Because of the uncertainty around the price of units going forward, we've elected to just hold on to the surplus units we've had at the moment. We think it'd be unwise to sell them if they're likely to go up significantly. Certainly if the government takes into account the advice of the Climate Commission, which they have more or less reaffirmed, but their previous advice, which was ignored by the government, and they were taken to court over that. So I don't have a read of the political, it's not my place, as to how that is responded to. But what the Climate Change Commission have recommended, the change this year compared with last year, is to reduce the number of units available. And so that will put upward pressure on the price. But we've got a good 10 years worth of credits at the moment based on the current usage.
Excellent, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Stallard?
Thanks, Chair Bryant. Just following on from that, we heard that the minimum or maximum reduction unique emissions factor will increase next year. What would be the dollar value of that increase in rough terms? Do you know? I understand you might not have thought through.
We do around 7,000. So it'd be another few, maybe another 300 or 500 tonnes of equivalent, I would think. I can do the calculation.
Right, so not significant.
That's not significant. It's not going to change us. I wouldn't even think it'd be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Andrew may have some more specific.
Yeah, it would be a bit more than, it would be a couple of $100,000 just off the top of my head. Maybe three.
Maybe if that could be circulated.
Yeah, but yes, we could do a calculation on that. But we've already provided for more than that in our budget, so I'm quite relaxed about that. It's not a cash cost because we've already owned the units.
Yeah.
You know, so from a cash flow point of view, it's not an issue. But it's whether they last for 11 or 12 years or 9. You know, which we've got lots of time to adjust our budgets in the years to come, so it's not going to affect us at the moment.
If I do a quick calculation, I suspect it's more like $50,000 change. We're currently doing around 7,200 or 7,300 units a year as our emission requirement, and that would mean that we'd go somewhere towards 8,000. So, 600, 700 tonnes extra at, somewhere like $80 a tonne. Currently, our price is currently $43.50 is what we currently have a value on our credits. So, but if you were looking at the market, it would be around $80 a tonne, maybe. So, that's for $50,000 or thereabouts variation.
Thanks. Just a couple more questions, if I may. Looking at the accounts on page 19, and just scanning some of the variances that against budgeted, and depreciation is only 55% to date of budgeted, and I wish the council overall had that problem. Is that just a staging thing, or is it?
Yeah, so through the chair, the way we account for essentially depreciation, and Andrew will probably correct me, is that we only start depreciating something once it's complete. And it's actually in operation. So when you've got some asset that's being constructed or has been, and it's a multi-year project, you're actually spending money on it over a number of years, but you're not actually doing any depreciation until such time as it comes in use. So some of those projects have been delayed, such as the front, the buttress, etc., which are quite large projects. We are now getting close to the end of them. The depreciation will start kicking in once they're complete. So,
thank you. And finally, the graph at the top of page 17 with all the gas flows and so on. Just a question really about future projections for gas flows and use, because I note from the graph the winter of 22, in some weeks almost all of that gas generated was going to produce steam at the hospital. The next winter of 23, the gas flow overall is much higher, so only about half. How might that look in future winters in terms of, do you anticipate, because I see the gas flow has been relatively steady the past year, will that increase over time or remain at that level?
Through the chair, our expectation is that it will remain somewhat similar to what it is now. It will go up and down a little bit around the levels, but there was a period in the last 6 months maybe where it's slightly elevated. That was what we were expecting it to stay at. The reason it's down at the moment is because we're having to take a lot of gas wells off for physical construction works on the site. So we're expecting it to stay. The model or the predictions are that it will move from around about the 800 cubic metres an hour that we've got at the moment at our peak to around about 1,000 to 1,100 over the life of the landfill, and then start decreasing after that. The significant increase in gas collection and destruction that we've done, which obviously has allowed us to meet the 90% reduction in emissions, was related to the fact that we've, put in a lot more wells, and we've put in a gas ring main, and those things, obviously have really paid off. Going forward, we're looking at, sending more to the hospital, only a small amount more. The hospital, we're in negotiation with the hospital to try to use gas as the principal fuel for their heating facilities at the hospital. So that's underway still at present. And one of the things that we can do in combination with the hospital is to increase the efficiency of the gas combustion systems at the hospital, so we can actually get more heat out of the gas that goes there, and not have to send too much more to the hospital. There is a significant excess gas available now. We knew that, and the LTP allows for funding for turning that gas into a usable product that we can sell. And so we're expecting that this current levels will be sustained or increased. There is a risk. Obviously, the risk profile is if we choose to remove all organic material from the landfill, then gas production would not be expected to increase or not, so we'd expect to see some change in that gas production level. We don't know what the future necessarily holds. We're predicting current levels or to follow the model in over the life of the landfill.
Councillor Courtney.
Thanks. Following on from that, what percentage, I think it's about 30%, the hospital take of our gas now? What is anticipated they'll take leading into the future?
Yeah, not a lot more. So currently the landfill business units send gas to the hospital. It averages around, I think, off the top of my memory, about 270 cubic metres an hour, maybe 260, something like that. That provides them with 85% of the heat need for the hospital. So when they use it as the principal gas supply, then that would obviously need to go up by 15%. So that would be the additional gas we'd sell or be and provide to them. But if they then put on what's called an exhaust gas heat exchanger or an economizer on the boiler, then that will increase the efficiency of the boiler by about 8 to 10%, which would actually compensate principally for the amount of additional gas. So we wouldn't necessarily be sending a lot different gas, maybe 5% more or something once all of that's gone through.
So what are we left with? 65% still to?
In the wintertime, 50 to 60%. In the summertime, 80%, 90% even at times, depending on how warm it is. That's, we've always got that seasonal issue that we have to deal with. Our intent is to put on a facility for collecting and compressing the gas, cleaning it up, turning it into a biofuel for around about 50% of the gas. We would then, in the summertime, still have excess gas, and we would probably look at putting an engine or something in to burn that excess gas to create energy to go to the grid. But we would never look at essentially putting in a facility to collect 80% of the gas during the summer, because the gas collection, the compression system is very expensive. So you're better off, doing it for a constant flow throughout the year and then doing something else with the peak during those summer periods.
Thank you for that, Nathan. Mr. Chair, can I go back to item 7 and draw Nathan's attention to the second one down the chart here, improvement opportunity. And you talked there, and you mentioned before about you're doing some, you were locating out the leachate pipe work as part of investigation for the front-facing construction. A section of the pipe broke in a joiner, and resulted in a significant gas release of 40,000 parts per million. Now, that to me is incredibly serious, dangerous.
What
are we going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Okay, through the chair, there's two elements to this improvement opportunity is what we called it. The first element was, should we have known where the leachate pipe was? And the answer is probably yes. So there was an issue in and around us having accurate as-built information for that particular pipe. So that was the reason we were having to dig to find it. I'm going to leave that to the side. Obviously, good as-built information is something we need to be much better at, and we are in process of doing that. The second element of it is when we struck a pipe and we had a high gas concentration in the excavation. When gas, the mixture of gas in air, if it's landfill gas, if you have around about 5%, or in this case 50,000 parts per million, through to about 15%, that is the combustible range or the explosive range. So that is essentially the range. So this was actually below the combustible range, still at 40,000 parts per million.
Was it really?
Yes, correct. So methane is actually a really quite an interesting gas, and it's not that flammable compared to a lot of other gases. And then it's a very narrow range in air that it will actually combust. So this was definitely what we'd consider a high risk, and it definitely would have gone through a combustible range somewhere in that hole as it was coming out of the pipe. We recognised that risk. Once it was hit, we recognised that there was a high concentration. Everybody backed away. We went and got our safety trailer. Well, we probably had it there already, I'd say. We'll have to know. And then we set up fans to dissipate all the gas to the point where we could get that gas level down to low enough levels that it was safe to work. We have purchased a laser methane analyzer. So we've got this handheld gun that you point and can shoot, and you can stand 30 metres away from the hole and actually demonstrate the concentration of gas in that area.
The result of this happening?
No, this was beforehand. So this is part of our overarching gas management and fire management processes. And we also obviously have purchased a lot of additional personal gas safety meters. So, no one would go near those holes. And we have a trailer set up that has fans and generators and all those things so that we can actually just tow it up to a hole and essentially, set up and dissipate gas to make it easy and convenient for our contractors to actually implement safe actions on those sites. And that's part of the reason for having the permitting system. The permitting system says, this is the project we are doing. If it changes, stop, go away and reevaluate the permit, reevaluate the safety controls. If the wind changes, sometimes we'll have to stop and go and reevaluate how we do it because it has an influence on what's going on. So the only people who can sign off a gas permit are senior management or management inside NTRLBU or inside our gas contractors organisation. We believe it's that important, and that's why work can't start on site some mornings if somebody didn't turn up at 7 a.m. because you can't get a gas permit signed off. So it's a really important role for us in this organisation.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney, would you like to move the recommendation that we received the report?
Sorry, can I just have another question?
Okay. I'm just conscious that Councillor Walker, you have a time restriction.
Thanks. Just briefly.
So we'll need to keep moving along, is what I'm saying.
Thanks for that. You mentioned before the potential uses for the excess gas. When might we next see a paper coming before the committee to consider those options?
It'll be in probably the first. We might be able to get it by the next meeting, but it's probably the first meeting of the next the next year. The next financial year.
Thank you. Just briefly, nice and nerdy. The Methane satellite was launched to measure methane emissions at quite a high resolution, several parts per billion, mainly to do with agriculture. Will it give us any information about the landfills and how they're performing?
I would love to think so, but I have no idea. I don't know enough about the resolution of it and how close it is. We have one of the reasons we bought the methane gas detector, the gun, is so that we can actually measure or try to measure gas emissions and gas concentrations above the landfill to see what sort of fugitive emissions we've got. And when we do those measurements now, in a large portion of the locations, we don't find any. So I'm hoping that the satellite won't really spot us.
Thank you.
I'm happy to move.
You're happy to move, councillor Walker? Was you indicating you had a question, or are you happy to second?
Happy to second, and my time frame is 12 p.m.
Well, thank you. So resolution's been moved and moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, resolution is carried. We now move into committee, don't we?
Yep.
So we'll be moving into, we've completed all the open.
We have.
So would someone like to move with that? Do we move into committee? Move councillor Stallard, seconded councillor Walker. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.